Okay. Hey, everybody. Rosh Chodesh is here. Chodesh Tov to everybody. This is Chodesh Sivan. This is a very, very important month, a very special month. If my eyes look very tired, it's because it's early here. So please forgive me. I'm awake in my heart. That's the main thing. So this is Rosh Chodesh Sivan. For anyone who doesn't know, just on a side note, the first 3 months of the year, they're corresponding to the first three avot, that is Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. That's the reason why we receive the Torah in this month of Sivan, because it says, give emet to Yaakov, give truth to Yaakov. That means that Yaakov is most bound up with the giving of the Torah. And in addition to these three people, they also represent three paradigms of existence, three ways to connect to Hashem, or three ways to experience life. And these three steps are constantly taking place. That is that Pesach or Nisan represents miracles, which is kind of connected to our Torah so far. That is that they come as a free gift. And then ultimately following that gift, the whole purpose of the gift is to elicit within you a ratzon, a desire to keep that gift or to utilize that gift more and more and more. However, what one comes to find is that as soon as a person thinks that he really has that gift, he finds that gift is taken away from him, which is very, very often and common in our lives, that as soon as we find that we have figured something out, we see that we haven't figured out anything. And that's a very painful process. However, that's actually a part of the process of actually internalizing that thing in which you got as a free gift, because now is the time for working for it. That is in the month of Iyar. This is the month of toiling. This is the month of Yitzchak. This is the month of earning that which you got as a free gift. And this is comparable to Olam Hazeh. This is the reason why Rav Natan in Sfirat HaOmer, the laws of Sfirat HaOmer, he explains that why is the essential mitzvah counting of the days? Because he says that it's connected this world, that the entire essence of this world is that we need to count our days. And that's the way that we accomplish Sfirat HaOmer. That's the way that we accomplish our lives here, by counting every moment, counting our days. Rav Natan says many people make a huge mistake, that they think to themselves, today is not the day for me. I don't feel well today. Things are not going well today. I got into a fight with my spouse today. I'm not doing well at work today. I woke up tired. I woke up groggy. A whole host of things that we could be going through. And Rav Natan says we all make this mistake where we then push the day off. And we say, today's not our day to come close to Hashem. Tomorrow, Bezrat Hashem, I'll feel better. Things will be better, X, Y, and Z. Rav Natan says you're making a huge mistake, because every single day needs to be counted. This is the ikar of our life. Don't think to yourself that today is not a day in which you can't connect to Hashem. For sure, today you can connect to Hashem in a specific, unique way. And Rav Natan says in a way that's different than any other day of your life. So if you miss today, you miss something that will never take place again. The Arizal makes this very clear, because when he explains the essence of tefillah, he says that Shachrit, Mincha, and Arvit are so vital, they're so important. And one of the reasons is because that Shachrit is a different Shachrit than ever is going to take place. There's a tikkun that can take place in that Shachrit that can't take place for the rest of history. And same thing by Mincha and Arvit. So that is to say that every single time and space exist in a vacuum. You never get the time again. And therefore, don't be dochek. Don't push it aside. Don't think to yourself, now is not the time to connect to Hashem. And we specifically do this in down times. We do this in difficult times. However, that time is just as valuable, if not more so, than the time in which you feel good. This is the time when, mamish, you need to gird your loins, and you need to really try and come close to Hashem, to acquire emunah. A couple of days ago, the first bomb went off in Israel that I experienced in my life. I was outside with my kids. I was showing them our new apartment, and I just went outside to the playground. I started to hear the bombs go off, and I really didn't know what to do. I just froze. The kids didn't know what was going on, thank God, because they're kids. But it's very easy in that space, so to speak, like to say after that, I'm not going to pray mincha now. Why? Because I'm startled, I'm overwhelmed. However, if you can gather the courage to understand that Eino Milvado, that's also Hashem. And the fact that nothing hit you and nothing hit anybody is because Hashem protected you. You start to develop a tremendous amount of yira from that, awe from that, or emunah from that. And I remember right after I prayed mincha, I felt such an intense prayer. I prayed so fervently, in a way in which I've wanted to for a long time, that I pray to pray like that all the time. And it doesn't happen for me necessarily. But there, right after the bombs took place and nothing happened to us, I started to realize how much we really need Hashem. And you feel that all the more so in Israel. And that's one of the things that I keep coming back to here. I think one of the reasons why Rabbi Nachman says Emunah is only possible here is because I think in America, or at least in Western civilization, the way your life operates, the way the world works there, you could easily be fooled into the illusion that everything is okay, that everything is always okay. You never need to worry about anything. Everything is given to you like on a platter. Even work is easier there. Even making money is easier there. I don't know. It's just being here. It's like the illusion is taken away. There's no illusion here. And part of that, even though that sounds like that would be stressful or unwelcoming, we wouldn't want such a thing. The truth is that it's very sweet, because when you realize how much you need Hashem, then you can really have emunah, right? Who are the people who develop the greatest amount of emunah? The ones who they realize they needed Hashem the most. So this is something that we need to understand, not to be dochek, not to push aside a day because we think that today's not our day. Hayom, Rabbi Nachman teaches today. Do whatever you can today, and even a little bit is good. Meaning, if in the end of the day, you could only do a little bit, even though you tried your hardest, that day is considered like you did it all day. It's not a matter of the quantity, it's a matter of you doing the best that you can every day. So this is just a side note. Now, we're on a very important point of Likutey Moharan, this Torah, which is going to take a interesting turn, because so far it's been very essential and it makes a lot of sense. Rabbi Nachman teaches like this: Emunah, faith, is tefillah. You want faith, you want to believe in Hashem, then you need to pray to Him. The more that you speak to Him, the more you're going to believe in Him. Speaking itself is an act of emunah. It's an act of faith. Emunah is an active thing. It's not a passive thing. And Rabbi Nachman says that the essence of emunah is to believe in miracles. And therefore, that means that when I come to pray to Hashem, how am I praying to Hashem? Am I praying to Hashem in a very meek way? Am I praying to Hashem in a very weak way? Or am I praying mamash that I believe that Hashem can change reality for me? When I pray to Hashem in a way that Hashem can change reality for me, I believe that that's really called tefillah. That's really called emunah. And Rabbi Nachman says it's only possible in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel. Okay, good. Now, after that, Rabbi Nachman says, how do you get to the point that you believe like that? How do you get to the point that you can enter the land of Israel? So the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, he says explicitly in his commentary to the Torah that the reason why we're kicked out of the land of Israel is only for two reasons, and it fits in very well to Rabbi Nachman's teaching. One reason is when we don't keep Shemitah. When we don't keep this mitzvah Shemitah, that means that for a whole year we don't leave the land fallow, and instead we try and work the land because we don't really believe Hashem can take care of us. We are kicked out of the land. So this is very connected to what Rabbi Nachman's teaching, that we're only able to stay in the land of Israel, meaning the land of Emunah, the land of faith, the land of miracles, when we believe that Hashem can take care of us in a miraculous way. That is, that we keep Shemitah. So keeping Shemitah is like a code word for I have Emunah. Okay, great. But Rabbi Nachman says, how do you get to that Shemitah? How do you get to believe in Shemitah? How do you get to believe in Emunah and Hashem? So Rabbi Nachman says that the only way to do that is to have emet, is to have truth. You need to attach yourself to real grade A Chalav Yisrael truth. By connecting to the truth of truths, you're able to acquire emunah. So this fits in beautifully with the Orach Chaim, because the Orach Chaim says the other reason we get kicked out of the land is when we're not studying Torah. When a Jew does not study Torah, he gets kicked out of the land of Israel. So too, you could just see practically in a personal life, when do I get kicked out of my own personal land of Israel? Meaning, when do I get kicked out of my consciousness of emunah, that I believe that Hashem is causing everything that takes place in my life? He is the originator. He is the orchestrator. He is drawing life force into every event into my life. And as well, with all of that, he can change anything in my life at any point. So that's all called living in the land of Israel. When's the only time that I can stay in that consciousness? When I'm learning Torah day and night. And this is the reason for the mitzvah to learn Torah, because we need to constantly be connected to truth in order to have faith. In fact, Rabbi Nachman taught us in the last part that we learned that faith is only called faith when we have Torah, when we have truth. The deeper Kabbalistic secret here is that the Jewish people themselves represent this aspect of faith. But the essence of faith is it's like a female, it's like a woman. Just like a woman, so to speak, doesn't feel whole unless she's being given over to receive from the male counterpart, so too the Jewish people do not feel faith unless we're given seed. That seed is seed of truth. And therefore, for us to feel whole, we, so to speak, we need to be bound in union with the truth. Whenever we're bound in union with the truth, then we have faith. Otherwise, it's called dinim, it's called justice, it's called constriction, it's called limitations. So the key is that us, as the female aspect of spirituality, we need to constantly have devekut, be attached to the male aspect of spirituality. That is the Torah. Okay, great. And that's all alluded to within Eretz Yisrael, because before the Jewish people came to the land of Israel, it's called Eretz Canaan. That's the land of poverty. That's the land of no emunah. When does it become emunah? When we get here, when Yisrael gets here, meaning when the truth gets to the land, then you have emunah. Good, beautiful. Now Rabbi Nachman has the twist. You ready? What is the key to finding the truth in your life? How can I find the personal truth of my life? How can I find the truth of reality? How can I find the truth that I can live with? How can I find the emet la'amito, the truth of truths? Now Rabbi Nachman says, behold, the pasuk says in Tehillim, you want the truth in the inner parts? In the innermost places, teach me wisdom. This is the pasuk from Tehillim, that's in Nun Aleph, pasuk Chet. Now Rabbi Nachman says like this, V'i efshar, it's impossible, lavo la'emet, to come to this truth of truths, which is necessary for emunah. Ela al yadei hikarvut l'tzadikim. Very much in the way of Rabbi Nachman to say that at the end of the day, like Shlomo Melech teaches, the end of the day, I passed all the days of my life. What is the most essential part of a Jewish person's life? What should be the goal of my life? So like Shlomo Melech says, it's Yirat Shamayim. Even though I know everything, I have gained all wisdom in the world. The greatest wisdom in the world is simply to listen to Hashem. So Rabbi Nachman, so to speak, has his own Shlomo Melech diuk in life. That is that the most important thing that a Jewish person can do in their whole life, and therefore something you must pray for every single day of your life, is to have hitkarvut to tzadikei emet, to have attachment to real tzaddikim. Now we're learning what is one of the reasons why it's so essentially important to have closeness to the tzaddik, to the extent that Rabbi Nachman said that having closeness with the real tzaddik is the most important thing a Jew can do in their life. And when a person has an opportunity to do so, he must run after it with everything that he has at the cost of everything else. What's the reason why it's so important? Why is it so essential? Why is it that faith and truth are dependent on closeness to tzaddikim? It's because of their advice. Because when we receive, meaning when we hear their advice and we do it even without understanding, we inscribe the truth within our heart. Because the essence of truth is not that it remains peripheral. It's not that it remains subordinate. The truth only becomes effective when it's etched into my heart. Just like a seed is only effective when it's sown into the ground, so too the truth is only effective when it's entrenched into my heart. And the only way, Rabbi Nachman says, that you can inscribe the truth into your heart, that you live with truth, that it's a living, breathing reality for you. You're not simply listening to shiurim on Torah anytime and getting chizuk and then going back to your life and it's the same old life. When does that truth become inscribed into my heart, that I'm living with it, that I feel it, that I breathe that truth? That's only when you listen to the advice of tzaddikim, even without understanding. Kamosh Katuv, like the pasuk says, Hen emet afatzta, you desire the truth in the inner parts. Kishe'ata chafetz emet, meaning it's saying that when you want truth, when a Jew desires the truth, betuchot usatum chochma todieni, ki ha'etzot shemakaba mehem hu bechinat nisuin v'zivuk, because the advice received from tzaddikim is the aspect of marriage and union, zivuk, sexual union. So here is a very, very deep chidush. You ready for this? This is a very, very beautiful concept, maybe one of the most beautiful concepts in Likutey Moharan, which goes to the essence of why I need the tzaddik emet in my life. Why do I need true tzaddikim in my life? And that doesn't just mean why do I need to go to Rosh Hashanah in Uman, or why do I need to dance and act crazy when I want to be happy even though I'm struggling with sadness. The advice received from true tzaddikim is so deep, because whenever you take the advice of a tzaddik, or whenever you take the advice of anybody, it's like you're engaging in union with them. How is that? Because when you receive advice from people who are not connected to the truth, they don't have the veikut with Hashem, they don't have union with the oneness of godliness, they're not connected to reality, they don't have da'at. It's like you have just had union with the negative forces of reality, the husk of reality, the peel of reality, the klipa. Why? Because the pasuk says hanachash hisiani. That the pasuk in Bereshit, Rabbi Nachman says that the pasuk says that the nachash advised Chava. Rabbi Nachman says, if you'll notice that the word for hisiani is very similar to hishiani. That is, that the nachash married me. That the same word for advise me is to marry me. Why? Because when you take the advice from someone, it's like you're taking seed from them. And where is that seed being implanted, as opposed to in physical union, where the male seed is entering into the womb of the woman, into the rechem of the woman? When you take advice from someone, that advice is like seed, and that seed is entering into your mind, and it germinates and it gives birth to a reality. Just as a practical example, let's say, for instance, after this class, someone tells you, did you hear about this new business? It's the easiest way to make money, X, Y, and Z. You do this, this, and this. You just need to work really, really hard at these times, and you're going to make a ton of money. So what happens? Let's say those times are during the times that you learn Torah, okay? So you might think to yourself, well, this is a mitzvah. Why? Because I'm going to be able to make more money. If I make more money, then I'm going to be able to learn more Torah. And then I'm not even relegated to these specific times. I could learn Torah whenever I want because I'm making money. Okay, great. Who did you get that eitzah from? Who did you get that advice from? Is that person a tzaddik? Because if that person's not a tzaddik, Rabbi Nachman saying that advice is coming from the klipa. And now what ends up happening is you take that advice and either you act on it. Now you start to invest yourself in that job. Now, let's say you are successful, but you're so successful that you actually don't want to learn because you want to keep making more, because you think that the more I make, then I'll finally learn. And then you end up learning less than before. Or let's say you end up doing the job. What happens most of the time? You don't end up making that money. That thing doesn't end up happening. The only reason that he told you that is because he makes a profit when you join the business as well. He gets an essential cut. You didn't know that at the time. And now you're working the job, you hate the job, you're not making money at the job, and you're also not learning. Or let's say you don't even take the advice, but now you're learning Torah, and while you're learning, you're thinking to yourself, you know what, maybe I should really take that job. So no matter what, that seed is going to give birth to some reality in you. So this is the reason why Rabbi Nachman says it's so essential that you're getting your advice from tzaddikim, because whether you act on the advice or you don't act on the advice, advice is seed. Seed always gives birth to a reality. Either the seed gives birth to a barren reality, that is, it's not fertile, or it's going to give birth to fertile reality. It's like planting in fertile ground. But either way, it's going to give birth to something. So what's the scary part about this? And what was the part that Rabbi Nachman was most fearful for us? That is that seed, like advice, only gives birth to reality after a course of time. That is, you won't be able to know whether advice was good until you've already experienced the damage from the advice or the benefit from the advice. Like, let's say, for instance, I gave a person advice and another person gives a person advice. A person's dating somebody. All of a sudden I tell them, you know what, I don't really think it's a good idea. And another person says, it's a great idea. You should definitely date that person. How are you going to miss out on that opportunity? She's so good looking. She comes from a good family, X, Y, and Z. Yes, she's not necessarily holding in the place you want her to, but eventually she could be, whatever. And then all of a sudden you're dating her for months and months and months. And then you propose and she says, no, sorry, I'm not interested. So now you spent a year or 2 years with her, but you don't get to see that that wasn't good eitzah and you lost those 2 years only after the fact. Well, let's say, for instance, they only heard me say you shouldn't do it, but they did it anyway. So they didn't receive good advice. So this is also an issue. That also is giving birth to reality. So Rabbi Nachman says, you see from this that advice is the key to truth. That advice actually comes from the place of truth. Because we see from the Nachash that when he gave advice to the Jewish people, to Chava, it says in Kuf Mem Vav Amud Aleph, that when we receive the Torah, which is coming up now in 6 days, right? On the 6th of Sivan, or I guess 5 days from now, we're going to have Har Sinai. And we know that with every Chag, that energy of the Chag comes into the world like it's happening again completely, okay? Now, what happened at the revelation of Har Sinai? The main thing says in Masech Shabbat that zuhama, that pollution that we got from the Nachash, left us for the first time. So we see that all negativity in life comes from that pollution that we got from the Nachash. Rabbi Nachman saying, what is the essence of that pollution? It was bad advice. That bad advice hadn't left us for thousands of years until Har Sinai. And now where is the proof from this? Where is this most explicitly stated? So Rabbi Nachman now brings a Zohar, which is completely in consonance with what we're saying now. Kisham kilu taryag 18 de kedusha, because the Zohar says that the 613 mitzvot are 613, 18 de kedusha. There are 613 pieces of advice of kedusha. This is exactly what Rabbi Nachman is teaching us. It's a wedding of kedusha, says the Zohar. Meaning, what was happening is that we were having union with Hashem, and Hashem was continually implanting us with pieces of seed, meaning pieces of advice. 613, so to speak, acts of union took place at Har Sinai. We kept being implanted with good advice. And why is advice called marriage? Because the kidneys advise very deep. It says in Masechet Brachot, when you get to Samech Aleph Amud Aleph, it says there that the kidneys advise. It said about Avram Avinu, where did he learn Torah from if he didn't have teachers? It said that his own kidneys advised him. Why? Because we know that according to medieval science and according to Kabbalistic wisdom, for different reasons, uchlayot hem klei holada, that the kidneys, they are the vessels of giving birth. We to try to explain this, we know now that kidneys are not the place of reproduction. However, according to Kabbalah, the Torah speaks about kidneys. It's only speaking as a metaphor for testicles, right? Those two things which actually are in the shape of kidneys, which there's two of them, just like there's two kidneys, that they're identical in size, just like kidneys. So you see a lot of parallels between kidneys and that area. But the reason is because the Torah doesn't speak in a lewd language, like the Rambam says constantly. That the Torah always alludes to things which are sexual, but doesn't say that outright. So too, now we can understand very deeply. Avram Avinu, when did it say that he came close to Hashem? It said he came close to Hashem. Hashem was hovering over him after he had the Brit Milah. Meaning, after he had attained a high level of sexual purity, he was able to experience Hashem resting on him for the rest of his life. The Shekhinah then rested on him for the rest of his life because he had Shmirat HaBrit. Now, what's the essence of the Brit? It's the two reproductive organs that are within the area of the Brit. That is, that now that you're Shmirat HaBrit, Avram Avinu is getting advised by his own kidneys, meaning his own testes. Okay? Because they are reproductive organs. And now that he's Shmirat HaBrit, now that he's connected to the truth, those reproductive organs are producing emet, they're producing truth, they're producing zera, seed. And this is the deep meaning of the pasuk, that it says that the kidneys are advising. Like we say in, Rabbi Nachman says that it's a very, very good thing to say, Tikkun HaKlali. The first parak of Tehillim of Tikkun HaKlali is the pasuk where it says there that my kidneys advise me at night. So now we can understand what is the deep meaning of this, meaning that the testes are giving eitzah. Okay. Now, if they are coming from a place of not being pure, I'm not connected to the truth, I don't have any level of purity in the area of sexuality. So then that part of me is actually going to advise me to act in behaviors which are destructive or not productive. However, if they are, then automatically the Torah teaches you're going to be getting good advice, clear advice. And this is really the reason why we go to tzaddikim to get eitzah. The whole difference between them and us is that they are, so to speak, called masters of the Brit. As a result of that, they have automatically intuited good advice. They know the truth. They get, what's the word? They get Ruach HaKodesh simply from their level of purity, okay? Nimsa, as a result of this, when we receive advice from a person, it's like we're receiving seed from them. And everyone according to the person, whether he's truly connected to Hashem or he's not, to the degree to which that person has attachment to spirituality and he is authentic and genuine, to that degree you're getting good seed. You're being implanted with good seed. However, to the degree to which a person's not, to that degree that seed is blemished. And that's why it's so important that when it comes to having conversations with people, it's like a free-for-all for us in our generation. We listen to the news, we listen to sports reporters, we listen to Facebook, we listen to Instagram, we're on YouTube, we're like a free-for-all where we don't even realize it. But the reason why the sages and let's say in the neighborhoods where Hasidim live, you see such a deficit in the areas of technology or the areas of input of media, the reason is very deep. It's because every single thing that you hear from another person really is a type of seed, right? We seem to think that we're impervious to the effect of influence, that we can hear whatever we want and we're not going to be affected by it. So according to Kabbalah, this is the opposite of truth. The real truth is everything you hear affects you. That's why the most important thing you can do is be very selective about what you hear. I remember that one of the keys for me, and this is so connected to this Torah, because Rabbi Nachman is going to teach in a moment, that the key to Geula, to redemption, is true advice, is good advice. Meaning that you're getting your advice only from true tzaddikim. So I remember when I was in the psych ward, and I was saying to myself that the only way I'm going to get out of here is if I do this hour of Yibodah, to do it every day. If I really give my life over to Hashem completely, not anymore superficially, not anymore theoretically, but I literally live with the simple reality that Hashem is the cause of my life, I'm going to go act as if. and I'm going to do what my Rebbe says. I'm going to act on that Eitzah. So because I acted on that Eitzah, not only did I get out of that psych ward, my whole life changed. That all came from true advice. And not only that, even when I got out of there, I realized that what is the Torah that makes me feel hopeful? What is the Torah that makes me feel excited? What's the Torah that makes me feel enlivened, that makes me feel that anything is possible? It's only Rabbi Nachman's Torah. And all the other Torah, even if it's true, it's not making me feel hopeful. It's not making me feel fresh. It's not making me feel alive. It's not making me feel reborn. So I decided that for a period of a month or a few months, I'm only going to listen to Breslov Chassidut. And I know that's not preferred. I know that that's not encouraged. However, that was something that I really needed then in my life because I needed only true Eitzah. I needed only true advice. I was not in a position that I could hear the Torah or the advice of other tzaddikim or other people that wasn't that pure truth of truths, because I really wasn't holding in a place that I was settled. So as a result of that, I needed only like this grade A, high octane truth. And with that, you're able to get to move out of your exile, to move out of your slavery, to move out of your psychological ibud. And because of this, the Torah, matayish koach. It says in the Gemara and Masechet Sanhedrin, Chaf Vav Amud Bet, that the Torah saps one's strength. What was it saying there? That when a person learns the Torah, it saps the strength of his Yetzer Hara. Meaning, we know that Chazal, the sages, say constantly that when a person feels inclined to do something which is destructive in his life, so the sages say, go to a Beit Midrash and learn Torah. What's the reason? Because it saps the strength of the Yetzer Hara. That this is the antidote, so to speak, to that negativity which looms within us, which is driving us away from good in our life. So now Rabbi Nachman says, V'nikra tushya ki taryag 18. It's called tushya because the word for matayish koach, this phrase of it saps my strength, is also the word for tushya, which means insight. Why? Because heim taryag 18, because there's 613 mitzvot, which are 613 pieces of advice. Li eitz of tushya, and the pasuk in Mishlei says, to me is eitzah is advice and insight. The eiton heim mekom nesuin, and advice is therefore likened to marriage in an aspect of union, because that also saps one's strength. Meaning to say, we know that according to the Gemara in Masechet Nida, Mem, Gimel, Amud Aleph, that if an entire body does not feel ejaculation when a person gives birth seed, then it's not considered seed. That the only way that the Torah considers it to be giving forth seed is if your entire body feels it. Now the Rambam, the most famous posek beside Rabbi Yosef Cairo, that he actually drew his style of psak halacha from the Rambam. So he explains that seed is formed from the entire body, and thus it's called the strength of the entire body. And improper use of reproductive capabilities causes one's strength to be diminished. This is what the Rambam says. Now, interestingly, boxers themselves, they will not waste seed a month before or engage in union because they actually know that it saps their strength. So the boxers are intuiting what the sages have told us for a long time. That is, that improper use of seed, meaning wasting of seed, that saps a person of his strength. And a person can just feel this in their life. They can experience it evidentially. That is, that when a person simply wastes seed, they'll see that afterwards. They're not motivated to go to work. They're not motivated to learn Torah. They're not motivated to get close to Hashem. They're not motivated to do Ibodadut. They don't want to do those things. Why? Because their strength has been sapped. Now, Rabbi Nachman teaches that in order to receive advice, real advice, a person needs to come to love the tzaddik, to desire to be close to him. In fact, Rabbi Nachman compares one's love for the tzaddik to be like one's love for his wife. He needs to have a similar love for his Rebbe that he does for his own wife. Now, what's the reason? Now we can understand. Because a person is not just married to his wife, he's also married to advice. Therefore, when a person has a Rebbe, has a tzaddik, he's constantly in union with the Rebbe. don't tell your wife. Okay. Now it's not in a physical way, it's in a intellectual way, that I'm constantly in union with my Rebbe intellectually because I receive his advice and I'm acting on his advice. And now as a result of that, I am in union with him. And therefore, how do I have the greatest union with the tzaddik? It depends on the amount of love that I have for him. And therefore, Rabbi Nachman tells us that tzaddik's love for his followers is very great, despite the continuing effort and strength that he must expend on their behalf. Because it's going to be made clear at the end of the lesson that when the tzaddik gives eitzah, when he gives advice to us, he needs to draw that advice from the supernal places of consciousness. He needs to actually draw it from the sphere of chokhmah. Chokhmah is the highest of the intellectual spherotic or spiritual realms of reality. The highest place, which is called chokhmah, that's where he's drawing that eitzah from. And then it comes down to netzach and hod. Netzach and hod are the place which, in conjunction with our physical body, they're like the testes of the spiritual soul. That's where reproductive seed is given birth to. It's from that area that's called netzach and hod. Now, interestingly, who are the two people who are connected to those areas of netzach and hod Kabbalistically? It's Moshe and Aaron. Who are the ones who gave the Jewish people the Torah and were considered the leaders of the Jewish people? Moshe and Aaron. So too within a Jewish man or a Jewish woman's soul, Moshe and Aaron are like the reproductive organs of that person's soul, because they are the ones who are advising him. And it's for that reason that it takes a lot of energy out, because you see that Moshe and Aaron, it's not easy for them to advise the Jewish people. They constantly have to battle with the Jewish people to give them advice, because it's actually very difficult to draw down advice, because it takes drawing from the highest possible places, because the actual seed comes from the mind, says the Tanya. So as a result of that, it takes a very high drawing. And I know on my own very limited level, and obviously real tzaddikim on their level, that giving a person real advice, having a conversation with a student and trying to give him eitzah from a place of true, genuine clarity, it takes a lot of energy out of you. And it's not even physical, because you're just talking. Why should it be that I could speak to somebody else, or I'm listening to something and I get energized? And yet when I give eitzah, I give advice, all of a sudden I feel my life force is being taken from me. It's because I actually gave forth seed and I didn't even realize it. So this is a very deep concept. Now, Rabbi Nachman says like this. There's a pasuk in Yirmiyah. That pasuk in Yirmiyah says, I planted for you a sorek, a vine, an entirely true seed. So now Rabbi Nachman says that this is the whole essence of Geula. Why? Because the advice of the tzaddik, hu kulo zera emet, the whole ikar of the advice of the tzaddik is it's completely true. This is why Rabbi Nachman says you have to be very careful about who you attach to. Who's your Rebbe? Who's your tzaddik? Who are you listening to? Who are you getting advice from? Are you getting it from the stock market? Are you getting it from advisors? Are you getting it from people who consider themselves to be experts? Who are you getting advice from? Are you getting it from real tzaddikim? Because whoever you're getting advice from, you are getting zera from them. And the only way that zera, that seed, is good for you is if it's true. Otherwise, that seed is barren. V'zeh perush, and this is the explanation of the pasuk. Vanochi netatich sorek. I have planted for you a sorek. Bechina geula. So Rabbi Nachman is saying that this pasuk says that I planted for you a tree or a vine, that sorek is actually the concept of geula. I have planted for you geula in the future, Hashem says to us. Kamoshikatu, like the pasuk says, the eshraka lehem va'kabsem. Like the pasuk says, I'm going to whistle to them and gather them in. Meaning what? So it's taught that in the future, in the days of Mashiach, how are you going to know that the geula is coming in? When the nations of the world have allowed the Jewish people to come back to the land of Israel. The sages said thousands of years ago that when the Jewish people come back to the land of Israel, it will not be by force, but in fact, the nations of the world are going to encourage us to come back, and you're going to know that you're close to Mashiach. So it's so fascinating, because after the Holocaust, The nations of the world were actually the ones to encourage us to come to the land of Israel. We did not ask for it ourselves. We actually asked to be in another country. And it was the nations of the world who encouraged us to come to the land of Israel. So we see there that that's the sorek, that's the sign that we're close to redemption, that we're close to Geula. But the pasuk, the language of the pasuk is ashreka lehem va'akapsem. I'm going to whistle to them and gather them in. The concept of whistling is the concept of Geula, is the concept of redemption. Now, interestingly, what's the gematria of sorek? It's 606. Rashi quotes a midrash saying, I planted for you a sorek, that is, I've given you another 606 mitzvot. That's the concept of Geula. Why? Because we know that the non-Jewish world, and before we received the Torah, we only had 7 mitzvot. They're called the 7 Noahide laws. When we got the Torah, we then got an additional 606. That's the gematria of sorek. That is the vine in which is going to bring redemption. So now we understand that this is 613 mitzvot total, the 606 of the sorek, of the vine, plus the 7 of the Noahide laws. They are actually 613 pieces of good eitzah, of good advice, good seed. That good seed is going to give birth to the redemption. It's going to give birth to the Geula. And how will this be achieved? How are we going to have this sorek? Ayadeh kulo zera emet. Only from completely true advice. Because it's only through the advice of real tzaddikim that you come to the truth. And that's why it's only through real tzaddikim that you get the truth, and only through the truth that you get to Amunah. Because it's only when you attach faith to truth that you have Amunah. Because as long as a Jewish person does not have real truth, which he can only get through the advice of tzaddikim, then his faith is not real faith. It's not staunch. It's not strong. It doesn't get you through the tides and the difficulties of life. It's not real emunah. It doesn't get you to believe in miracles. It doesn't get you to talk to Hashem. If faith is purely intellectual, it's not inscribed in your heart. How can you inscribe faith in your heart? Only when the truth is inscribed in your heart. And Rabbi Nachman says, when does the truth go from being theoretical to being practical? When does the truth go from being purely possible to being actual in a person's life? It's only when bli intellect, without understanding, I take the advice of real tzaddikim and I live with that advice. That I take the hour of Hibodedut and I talk to Hashem for the hour, even if it doesn't make sense to me. That I get up for Tikkun Chatzot. I get up before sunrise to do this practice called Chatzot. Because Rabbi Nachman told me to, because he says it's mesugol da'at, it's mesugol amuna, it's propitious for gaining amuna and for gaining da'at, that I'm going to go to the mikveh, even though I don't even know why I'm going, that I'm going to learn Gemara at night, because Rabbi Nachman says to in the third Torah Likutey Moharan. Simple as that. I take the advice of the tzaddik, and I live with that advice. Rabbi Nachman says that one thing itself is going to bring you to Geula. You could see very clearly that those people who are students of Rabbi Nachman, the whole difference between the students and the teachers is often this one fact. The teachers live with the advice without thinking. I live with it because I believe in the tzaddik. I believe in his eitzah. I believe in his Torah. And as a result of that, I get to experience the blessing of it. The whole difference between them and often the students is the students are fascinated by his truth. They are connected to the Torah, the tzaddik, but they do not have the courage yet to live with that truth without understanding that I'm going to do everything the tzaddik says. Rabbi Nachman says, you need to learn Shulchan Aruch every single day without fail, even if it's only one halacha. So do you do that? So you might say to yourself, I don't like learning Shulchan Aruch. I don't like learning Jewish law. So you're in the same boat as me. However, it doesn't matter because it's following the eitzah of the tzaddik himself. It's following this advice. That's the main point. It's not the learning of the Shulchan Aruch itself that's even the most essential. It's the fact that I am bittling, I'm nullifying myself, my ego, my powers of perception to someone who is much more clarity, much more keen understanding of spiritual reality than me. He can see clearly and I can't. So as a result of that, by me living with that rabbi, that tzaddik's eitzah, his advice, then I have good seed within me and it's going to give birth to good reality. It's going to give birth to fruit. Only blessings going to come. You know, people ask me often, why are you going to Israel? And I said, because my Rabbi told me to. So you're going to say, yeah, but like, okay, great. So what if your Rebbe told you to do anything? You're going to do it. And I said, every single piece of advice that I took from Rabbi Nachman, even and especially when it didn't make intellectual sense to me, that's where all the blessing in my life came from. To do an Ari Bodadu doesn't make intellectual sense. It doesn't fit in with the modern era. And yet when I took it upon myself, I completely transformed my life, or Hashem completely transformed my life, right? When I get up for Tikkun Chatzot, which I try to do as often as possible, you would think I'm going to feel exhausted. I'm going to feel bad. Why? Because I only got 5 hours of sleep. I only got 5.5 hours of sleep. Sometimes even 4.5, 4 hours of sleep. Like today, I'm running on 4 hours. So I'll probably need a nap later in the day. But the truth is somehow, and I can't explain it, and I've actually heard Gedalia Fenster speak about it as well, you feel like this huge drawing down of life force of energy when you do Tikkun Chatzot. It's something that's supernatural, something that doesn't make any sense. That's the reason why you cannot only follow the advice of the tzaddik when you want to, or when you feel like it, because then you're missing out on the fruit. The fruit comes when you have union with the tzaddik. When you have union with the tzaddik, you draw down his seed. When you draw down his seed, you draw down the seed that comes from Chokhmah, that is from the light of the Ein Sof itself. And good. Somebody asked on the bottom, where can we find Tikkun Chatzot? If you see in the beginning of any Siddur, at least the Sephardic Siddurim or the Sephard Siddurim, I believe it also should be in the Ashkenazi Siddurim, you'll see Tikkun Chatzot there. It says in the Shulchan Aruch that anybody who's real Amunah, anybody who's real Yirat Shamayim is going to get up for Tikkun Chatzot. There's a question nowadays if it applies to us. Most people hold, at least superficially, that it's not necessary. It's not halakha, but it would be good to do it. But according to Rabbi Nachman and his followers, so one of the biggest customs of Breslov Hasidim, beside Hibodedut, is Tikkun Chatzot, that they're known for this this practice. So you should see it there. When you get accustomed to saying it, you can literally do it in 5 to 10 minutes. It doesn't take a long time. But Rabbi Nachman says that when you do this, it's going to bring you to perfection of faith, Amunah. It's going to bring you to perfection of Da'at. It's going to draw lost souls of Jewish people who are stuck in negative ways of thinking, that they're disconnected from spirituality, and it's going to cause the force of negativity to vomit that up and to let these souls come back to Kedusha, come back to Eretz Yisrael. All of this is through Tikkun Chatzot, 5 to 10 minutes. You know, even if you do Tikkun Chatzot and then you go back to sleep right after, yeah, I do that sometimes. So it works. You don't have to stay up the whole entire night. Women can do it as well, okay? So this is a very, very big thing. And I've actually experienced, just like with Hibodedut, I have a tremendous feeling of positivity that you draw a chut shel chesed during the day simply from doing this one practice, and it only takes about 5 to 10 minutes. Now, obviously, best case scenario, you went to sleep early and now it's just the beginning of your day. That's the best. You're going to feel an amazing amount of energy and strength. You feel like you started your day the right way. If you could get some Hibodedut in there before you start the day also. Rabbi Nachman says that's the best time to do Hibodedut, is before everybody wakes up from their sleep. There's many deep spiritual reasons for that. But if you can do Tikkun Chatzot and then you can go outside and do Hibodedut while it's still dark out before it turns light, and then the sunrise happens, that's the best way to start your day. You can say Tikkun Chatzot until the sun rises. Okay, once the sun rises, you're no longer allowed to say Tikkun Chatzot. And right now, until after Shavuot, you only say the second half of Tikkun Chatzot. So this is a good time to start, because if you only say the second half of Tikkun Chatzot, it's actually only going to be like 3 or 4 minutes. It's going to take you to say it all. That's called Tikkun Leah. So that's the only part we say now. In the times that we do Chatzot, when it's not, let's say, holidays, or it's not Sfirat HaOmer, so then we say Tikkun Rachel and Tikkun Leah. But now we only say Tikkun Leah, because Rachel, so to speak, represents bitterness, and then Leah represents the redemptive aspect which kicks in after the bitterness. Right now, we're only speaking about the redemptive part because we're in a time and space in which redemption is felt very intensely because we're close to Har Sinai, we're close to the receiving of the Torah again, which is hinting to the days of Mashiach. Bezrat Hashem, we should see it soon in our days. This is, behold, you want truth in the inner part, the kidneys. Baklayot, meaning that from the kidneys, chokhma todieni, I'm going to get wisdom. Because as kel lekabel tipei hamoach, let me merit receiving drops of the mind, that is, tipei seichel, drops of seichel, drops of the intellect of the tzaddik, that through receiving the advice from tzaddikim and acting on it, even when I don't understand it, then I'm going to merit to the real truth. And it's going to be entrenched into my heart. And when the truth is entrenched to my heart, because the drops of the intellect or the drops of seed of the mind of the tzaddik, which are encompassed within his eitzah, his advice, they are entirely true seed. When I act on that, even without understanding, I get the truth. And when a Jew gets the truth, he gets emunah. And that is the emunah that elicits miracles. That's the emunah that brings you to the land of Israel. That's the emunah that brings you redemption and geula in your life. And Bezrat Hashem, we should all see it, b'mirav yameinu, both personally and collectively, that we're living in a time in which we have a magefa, which is spread all over the world, that again, Israel is under attack. And the Jewish people are tired. I went to go do Hibodedut yesterday, and I remember my wife's sister was like, pray for Mashiach to come. Obviously, pray for Mashiach to come, but I don't know. I just feel like there's like a certain sensation that we just can't take it anymore. We've tried the best that we can. At least for me, it feels like we've gotten everything that we can, so to speak, out of this phase of history, and we're all really waiting that we should be able to experience something redemptive, something messianic, something really transformative, something different. And Bezrat Hashem, we should see it soon in our days. Anybody have any questions from today's lesson before we go into Rosh Chodesh Sivan? And Bezrat Hashem, hopefully we'll have another class before then. But if not, this Shavuot, Bezrat Hashem, should be the Shavuot of Mashiach. It should be the receiving of the Torah of the Mashiach himself. And if I don't speak to you until then, one of the pieces of advice that Rabbi Nachman gives, and it's very the highest level of God consciousness. So when you do Shavuot, try and be by a place that you're able to go to the mikvah and walk over there. If you go to the mikvah on Shavuot, you're going to see a tremendous amount of connection to an internalization of God consciousness that year. That is a guarantee from Rabbi Nachman. I remember this past year, it was very hard with the COVID virus. And I went with my cousin, and we literally walked like 45 minutes or an hour to get to the mikvah. To fulfill the eitzah of the tzaddik, and it was very, very sweet because when we got to that mikveh, the only people who were there were breast lovers. So obviously they all had heard about this eitzah, and this year, Baruch Hashem, has been a beautiful year in terms of drawing down da'at, and obviously Tzion has been the main beneficiary of all of that. So, anybody have any questions?
Would you be able to re-explain the whole thing with Tikkun Chatzot and Tikkun Leah and Rachel? I didn't understand.
Sure. So Tikkun Chatzot is a practice that was given by our sages 2,000 years ago after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. Tikkun Chatzot is a time in which we mourn over the loss of the Beit HaMikdash. Now, on paper, what's so important about mourning over the Beit HaMikdash? It's just the building. However, according to the Gemara, and specifically Rabbi Nachman talks about this constantly, the Beit HaMikdash is called the Jew's mind. If a person notices, however, whatever state of mind you're in, that's how you feel. When a person has clarity and peace and tranquility of mind, he feels good, he feels happy, he feels excited, he feels life force. That's called your Beit HaMikdash is rebuilt. But when you feel confusion, when you feel bilbul of the mind, when you feel disoriented, when you feel like lost, you don't know what you're doing or where you're going, you don't have any type of clarity in your mind, that's when sadness comes, that's when anger comes, that's when lack of energy comes, that's when depression and atzvut comes. That's called the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed. So Rabbi Nachman says that, and he says it many, many times, it's very, very, very good to get up and do Tikkun Chatzot. It's good for many reasons, okay? So now, what are the two aspects of Tikkun Chatzot? There's two parts. There's Tikkun Rachel, Tikkun Leah. Tikkun Rachel, which is the rectification of Rachel, that's the first part. This is, so to speak, that I'm mourning over the loss of the Beit HaMikdash, meaning I'm mourning over the loss of God consciousness in the world. I'm mourning over my disconnect from Hashem, or the disconnect from my family and friends to Hashem. That's the period of mourning. That's Tikkun Rachel. And when I do that, and I follow up by saying Tikkun Leah, that Tikkun Leah is now I'm not mourning anymore, I'm just yearning. I'm yearning for Geula, I'm yearning for redemption, I'm yearning for the rebuilding. So when I do both of these, I've achieved the tikkun that the sages gave to us, that the Zohar speaks in many different places, is so propitious, such a segula, and that Rabbi Nachman was very, very emphatic with his followers that they should do every day. So this is called tikkun chatzot. Now, when is the time that you could say tikkun chatzot? It's from midnight, it's from chatzot until alot hashachar, until dawn. From that sweet spot of chatzot until alot hashachar, you could say tikkun chatzot. So any time in that period. The only thing that you need to know, though, is that on days in which it's a chag, like Shavuot is coming up, or on Shabbat, days in which, even now, Sfirat HaOmer, I think I read. So on days in which we don't say tachnun, in which we don't do vidui, and days in which we don't speak about negative things, that we don't want to welcome feelings of bitterness or sadness. So in those days, we don't do tikkun rachel, that is the time of mourning. We only do tikkun leah, that is that we only yearn for redemption. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So for Tikkun Chatzot, how do we know which one's the Tikkun Rachel and which one's the Tikkun Leah? Like, is there?
It's gonna tell you.
Okay.
It's gonna tell you. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Hatzlacha. Good luck. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
First off, thank you so much for this amazing class. And I just wanted, so I'm a little confused, right? And I don't think it was your intent to intimidate at all. But you know, the concept of truly connecting to the tzaddik emet, like really getting all your advice from this true tzaddik. Like as of right now, I guess I'm asking for advice, like in my specific particular position, in transition, in my transformation, being here in Florida right now, and hopefully getting my entry permits to go to Israel, study in yeshiva this week, hopefully next week latest. And then getting there. So as of right now, I don't necessarily, like, I know for you, like you're like, well, when my Rabbi told me, I do everything my Rabbi told me. So my Rabbi told me to go to Israel, and you moved without question, right? So like right now, like as far as the concept of my Rabbi, sure, I love Rabbi Nachman, but where do I get my advice? And in this transition period, I guess what I'm asking is, yeah, what is your recommendation? What is your advice on where I get my advice?
Obviously, I'm a little biased, but I think for good reason. And my opinion, and this is the only thing that I can vouch for. You know, there was a person. His name was a very big tzaddik. He was a rabbi. His name was Rav Rosenfeld, Chaim Rosenfeld. And he had a famous quote. He said that right now outside it's dark, it's nighttime. We know for sure it's nighttime. But he said, I am much more sure of the fact that Rabbi Nachman is the tzaddik emet, he's the true tzaddik, than the fact that it's night right now. I agree with him. So anybody who asks me, who should I receive advice from? Who should I get my advice from? I tell you, Rabbi Nachman. His advice is true advice. This is what he's hinting to. The fact that his eitz is always good for everybody. He's everybody's Rabbi. That's why we call him Rabbeinu HaKadosh, our Rabbi, no matter who you are. So for you, no matter where you are, whether you're in transition, you're not in transition, anybody can receive the advice of the tzaddik at any point. Now, obviously, there's different degrees and levels of intensity for which I feel genuinely that I want to take this advice, or I'm ready to take this advice. So this is where Hibodedut comes in. Let's say, for instance, I'm not at a point yet that I'm like David, that I really know for sure, just like gravity, if I drop a ball off a building, it's going to hit the floor. I know that everything that Rabbi Nachman says is true and it's going to work and it's good. So let's say I'm not holding there yet. So what do? So you pray to Hashem, Hashem, help me to believe like that. Help me to get to the point that I really believe mamash that the advice of true tzaddikim is the key to my redemption. If you pray for that every day, then it'll come to you. Then not only will you want it, but you will take it, right? And this is the key. So whatever you learn in these classes, either you're holding by it, and if you're not holding by it yet, which is totally fine, it's totally normal, it's part of the process, and it takes different people different amounts of time before they realize. Gedalia, took him almost a decade before he did Hibodedut. It took me almost 3 or 4 years before I did Hibodedut. It took you a week, right? So everybody has a different process. Now, my experience, and I'm sure his experience, and I'm sure everybody who has become really a chassid of Rabbi Nachman has experienced over time that everything he says works. So then you get to the point that it's no longer about, let me see what works, let me see what fits, let me see what makes sense for me. It's just like, if this gym trainer that I'm working out with is constantly producing results, that my six-pack is getting tighter and my arms are getting more swole, yeah? And I'm looking more and more and more like Mike from Jersey Shore. I don't know. So then I'm just gonna follow the advice, even if I don't understand. So this would be my advice, that I pray every day in my Hibodedut, Hashem, please help me to have real attachment to a real tzaddik. And I know now that means that I listen to the advice of the tzaddik and I follow it. Now, Hashem, I don't necessarily feel comfortable yet to do everything that the Rebbe says, or I don't feel like I'm up for it yet. I don't feel like I can get up in the morning and do tikkun chatzot. I don't feel like I'm ready to live in Israel. I don't feel like whatever. I can do an hour of Hibodedut every day, so whatever it is. So that doesn't mean, though, that I don't pray to Hashem to help me to be able to. That's the prayer. The prayer is, Hashem, help me to believe in this advice, help me to want to keep this advice, and ultimately help me to do it.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. I feel like, honestly, every question that comes up for me during these classes, first, there's usually not too many questions at this point because I'm internalizing and trying to absorb as much as I can. But I feel like every question that comes up to me, ultimately, the answer is the same. Ask Hashem in your Hibodedut.
100%. That's it. That's all you're going to get.
Beautiful.
Somebody also asked me, somebody is struggling, stuff with his wife, and they say you have to talk to Hashem. He's probably tired of hearing it. He's heard it from me every single conversation we've had for years. And as my Rebbe Rav Walken used to say, all roads lead back to Breslov. He said it as a joke, but it's true. In the end of the day, there's nothing else to trust. There's nothing else to believe in except for Hashem. Abba min Shemaim. You're Abba in Shemaim. Okay. Any other questions? Someone said, when during Shavuot should we try to go to the mikveh? Great question. You should try and go in the morning right before you pray Shachrit. So right before, whenever your minyan is going to pray Shachrit in the morning, which is usually Nate's, if you stay up all night like the sages told us to on Shavuot, you have the zchut and the merit to do so. So you would have to try to time it out in a way that you go to the mikveh after you learn all night, right before you pray Shachrit with the minyan. Any other questions?
Hey, Rabbi, is there any special learnings that we should try to do on the night of Shavuot that we stay up?
Yeah, so according to the Sephardim and according to the Hasidim, according to the Mekubalim, you do something called the Tikkun Shavuos. That is that the Arizal and the other Kabbalists came together and they created a very special, like Tikkun Chatzot, they made it for Shavuot. That is that it's a little bit of every piece of Tanakh, every piece of Chumash, every part of Tanakh, parts of the Zohar, and you say it with a group of people if you can. If not, you say it by yourself. and this is what they were accustomed to doing. So if you look, you'll say Tikkun Shavuot. You'll see it in your Machzor for Shavuot if you're Sephardic or if you're Hasidic, and if not, if you're Ashkenazi, so then you can just get a separate Tikkun Shavuot. And if you don't want to do that, so the main thing is that you stay up all night and you don't fall asleep and you learn Torah. But I believe that Rabbi Nachman did the Tikkun for Shavuot, just like the Arizal. Any other questions? Okay, everybody have an amazing, amazing day. Have an amazing Rosh Chodesh. I wish you all a lot of blessing. This is a day which is very, very propitious for Teshuvah, for getting close to Hashem. This is a day for restarting. This is a day for renewing. So everybody take the opportunity today to renew and to ask Hashem for everything that you want this month. And visit Hashem that we should draw down the Torah from Har Sinai, Shavuot.
What up?